Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Now, Taylor Swift isn't just a singer-songwriter. She's a master strategist, brand architect, and cultural force who has continuously reinvented herself while building one of the most loyal fan bases in history. From her early days as a teenage country singer to becoming a global pop icon, Swift has defied industry norms, controlled her own narrative, and redefined what it means to be an artist in the modern era. But what can business leaders, entrepreneurs, and creatives learn from her journey? Well, today I'm joined by Kevin Evers, the author of a new book titled There's Nothing Like This: The Strategic Genius of Taylor Swift. He has analyzed Swift's career through the lens of leadership, branding, and strategic reinvention. We'll explore the mindset, the marketing genius, and the industry shaping moves that have made Swift one of the most influential figures of our time. So, whether you're a Swiftie or a business leader looking for inspiration, or just someone fascinated by the art of reinvention, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's get started. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. And Swift often is the center of public scrutiny, yet she consistently turns these moments, like you said, into artistic breakthroughs. How does she manage? I mean, let's just talk about that for a second, because what you just mentioned, is a huge part of her story and the book, as well as rather than avoiding scrutiny, Swift leans into it and flips the narrative, that narrative reversal. So that good girl image, now she's embraced a darker, edgier persona and reputation. And then when some fans questioned her indie credibility, she responded with another reinvention and released two albums that were in a complete different genre, folklore and evermore. Speak to us on how did she manage to control this narrative so effectively and be able to reframe challenges on her own terms?
A lot of people criticize her for being calculated and being overly strategic. I think a lot of her musical decisions just stem from the fact that that's what she wants to do. So her move to indie rock with folklore was a big jump for her because the previous album was a big pop album called Lover. And I'd argue that she had plateaued at that point, right? She wasn't growing as much as she had before. Sales weren't as great as they were before. But then the pandemic happened. So she used that as a great opportunity because she wasn't touring. And because of what was going on in the market, she didn't have to think about the big Taylor Swift company, big Taylor Swift superstar. Because, and she said this, she didn't have to worry about how her songs were going to play on radio. She didn't have to worry about how her songs were going to sound in a stadium, right? She was free of all these constraints now. So what does she do? She goes back to her roots in many ways, her singer-songwriter roots. She partners with Aaron Dessner, who's in the band The National, and he co-produced the album with her. And if you read the backstory about their relationship, that was she found so much creative freedom there. They worked very quickly. He would send her versions of songs. She would do the lyrics. They'd go back and forth. And that was a really important transition for her because not only did it invigorate her artistically, but it also expanded her audience. Now, Taylor Swift has received her flowers throughout her career, don't get me wrong, but she's a teen. She was a teen artist making songs for teenagers, and her audience, even as she matures, predominantly female. And historically, artists that have predominantly female fan bases aren't necessarily taken as seriously as they should be. So then she moves to this more mature indie sound. And there's a great viral tweet that went around at the time that Folklore was released. And the guy said, I didn't think Taylor Swift had to corner the elder millennial dad market, but she did. And that's exactly what she did. That album was the most critically acclaimed album of her career. And it really expanded her audience, but also gave more validity and legitimacy to the music that she was creating.
Well, you're right that her response to the pandemic wasn't just a survival tactic. It was a masterclass, really, in reinvention. By pivoting away from high energy pop anthems and stadium tours, she embraced, like you said, that stripped down storytelling driven sound with Folklore and Evermore. These surprise releases, recorded remotely with new collaborators, resonated deeply with listeners and expanded her listening base, which is so critical. And Taylor has long demonstrated unparalleled ability to captivate audiences, not just through her music, but through her masterful control of public moments. So, whether on stage, in interviews, or at award shows, she turns every appearance into a strategic opportunity to deepen her brand, engage with fans, and fuel anticipation for the next move. And one of the best examples of this was at the VMAs, where she repeatedly leveraged her that event for a major career moment. So speak to us more about that and how that really serves as a masterclass in marketing.
If you want to understand Taylor Swift's current marketing techniques, you have to understand that her fan community is very similar to true crime communities on Reddit. The curiosity, the speculation is rampant. And a big reason for that is because Swift has taught her fans to do this. She's always loved hidden messages. She's always used hidden messages. But this is scaled to absurd heights at this point. Because in the past, Taylor Swift would always tease things. She would tease announcements, but there was only a few options, right? She created an album, a new album. She released a new album every 2 years. So if we were 20 months in, you knew that it was probably a new album that she was going to announce. But now it's pure chaos. And what's interesting is she's not as online as she used to be. So now, and especially because of TikTok and the high engagement on TikTok, everything that she does, everything that she wears, everything that she says is highly scrutinized because fans think that it could be a message for what's coming next. So before the VMAs, there was speculation that Swift was going to release her next re recording of Reputation. So that was the speculation. And there's rumors that she may go to the VMAs. Now, Swift doesn't go to too many of these events anymore. So if she does, fans know that something's going to happen. But she doesn't announce that she's going to go. MTV doesn't announce that she's going to go. Then suddenly, right before the show starts, there she is on the red carpet. What is she wearing? She's wearing a dress that looks very similar to a dress that she wore in a video for one of the Reputation videos. So there it is, sign number one, Reputation. She's given us a sign. So then she wins an award. And she says something that sounds like something she said during the Reputation era. Sign number two. So here she's at a major media event, but the internet's going crazy. Everyone on Reddit is like, it's Reputation, it's Reputation, it's Reputation. So everyone's engaged. People are posting videos on TikTok. So because of personalized algorithms, even casual fans are learning about this. So Taylor Nation, all the fans are really focused on the VMAs and what Taylor is going to say. So then she wins the final award of the night. So here it comes. Here's the announcement for Reputation. But what comes next is very Hitchcockian. The misdirection. She says, oh, I'm going to release a new album, a brand new studio album. So she is, in that moment, she had mastered modern internet fan engagement because she knew that before the show that she would get her fans into a tizzy, and then she uses a mass market media event, an old school media event, which is the MTV VMAs, to announce this new album when she knows all eyes are going to be on her. And then that turns into a huge event because then fans go on the internet again and they're speculating about the new album. And then other media cover the new album. It becomes a huge event. So that was a masterclass in how Machiavellian Swift can be when it comes to her fan engagement. And her fans are here for it. They love the clown. They love to come up with theories. But Swift really pulled one over on him with that one.
When you talk about a lot of things that really she does great, but it seems like there's two common differentiators for Swift that's followed her throughout her career is her ability to engage her fan base and make them super fans and all that she does to create that devoted following. And the other is her storytelling, which she's always had. Talk to me really more about kind of that songwriting and storytelling, that really that other differentiator, and how has that really separated her from her colleagues and from other people in the music industry?
What she's really good at is intimacy and vulnerability. And a lot of that is in the nuances and the subtleties of what she does. When you listen to her music, she's so sharp. Her ideation is so sharp, right? Some songwriters go to more, lean on more poetic means where you're not really quite sure what they're saying. I mean, you feel it, but you're not really quite sure. Swift, you always know what she's saying. And the way she sings, she's so great at tone. She's so great at emotion. And she can change tone and she can change emotions from word to word. And her product is extremely important. I don't think if her product wasn't this good, I don't think she would be as successful. Yes, she's extremely business savvy. She has great entrepreneurial instincts. But that's the first stage of making that deep connection with her audience, right? And I've talked to fans and they all feel like, oh, I feel like she's talking to me, right? And that's the critical thing. That's what hooks people from the very beginning. And then everything else stems from that.
I love that. Yeah. Leveraging storytelling to build that emotional connection because Swiss music, you're right, is deeply personal, yet universally relatable. And companies and leaders should also think of this by crafting authentic narratives that resonate emotionally with their audience, making their brand or mission part of their customers' lives. And Swift has done this so well. The other big differentiator, Swift's fan engagement is unparalleled. How can leaders kind of take a page from her playbook to cultivate more loyalty with their customers?
So this is the most important thing I would say about Swift is she is extremely customer obsessed. In her case, fan obsessed. She's the Jeff Bezos of music. Her fans would say that Jeff Bezos is the Taylor Swift of Amazon, but she's the Jeff Bezos of music. And I say this because Jeff Bezos, one of his famous shareholder letters, said, and I'm going to paraphrase here, he said, you know, our customers are delightfully dissatisfied. They may tell us that they love what we're doing. They may tell us that they love our products and that we're doing a great job. But deep down, customers always want more. And it's our job to delight them and to use that dissatisfaction to drive innovation. Now, that statement fits Swift to a T. She has always gone above and beyond for her fans. She always tries to delight them. And you can see this when she sent Christmas presents to her fans. It was called Swiftmas. We talked about this earlier, how she invited fans into her living room to have listening sessions. She didn't have to do that. She could have done that in a public place, but she gave fans more access to her. But we saw this at the Eras tour to the extreme. Taylor Swift could have played a greatest hit show. She has never done something like that before. She could have played 2 hours and fans would have walked away and they would have been happy. But she didn't. She played over 3.5 hours. Her set list spanned more than 40 songs. And she devoted a set list to every album of her career besides debut, a mini set. That's going above and beyond. That's setting high expectations and then exceeding those high expectations. And if you were to poll 100 or even 1,000 business leaders, if you said, you need to be customer obsessed, true or false, they'd all say true. All of them would say true. But the problem with, or the challenge with being so customer obsessed is that the more you delight fans, the more you raise the bar. So Swift, by going so far to the extreme, you would think may set herself up for failure, but she continually finds new ways to delight her fans. I mean, she's so obsessive about it, it's almost pathological. But I would argue that this is the reason why her fans stick around so much. because she sets those high expectations, she exceeds those expectations, and she's incredibly consistent, and they can trust her to always come up with new ways to delight them.
Let's talk about kind of her, how she evolved and what was her impetus or her motivation behind re-recording these albums.
So this was one of her craziest strategic moves because this is a strategy that really shouldn't have worked. Re-recording your older music, especially for someone who had built such close relationships with her fans. I mean, her fans have listened to those albums thousands of times. So you're going to re-record them. They're basically near facsimiles of what they were before, but it's an older Taylor singing older Taylor music. But this is another moment where she turned a controversy into a moment of empowerment for her and her fans because Swift's older music was sold, and Scott Borchetta, who's the head of her former label, was well within his right to do that. But Swift also had a claim to that music too, because of who she was and the artist that she was and the path that she trailblazed. Because it wasn't just songs, she had built a personal brand based on these deep connections with her fans. And I could understand why she felt even more ownership over that music than maybe some other artists would. So she decides, she's like, okay, well, if I can't have ownership over this music, I'll re record it. And this is something that Prince threatened to do in the late 90s in his famous fight with Warner Brothers, but he never did it. And no one's ever done it at such a huge scale. One, it's expensive, but then you would think, is this even going to work? And the reason why it worked, again, goes back to Swift's relationship with her fans. If they didn't have such a close personal relationship with her, or at least feel like they had that close relationship with her, if they didn't see her as a source of inspiration and empowerment, I don't think they'd get behind those albums. I mean, maybe they would, but her 4 re-records that she released have all gone to number 1. They've been huge successes. And I think Swift is really the only artist who could do this at such scale and find so much success releasing her older music this way because her fans are doing it for her. That's why they're really behind it.
Talk to me also about how the Eras tour, why was it so successful and how did that, what piece does that occupy in her strategic strategy? Because it's the highest grossing tour of all time, huge economic benefits for the cities that it was going to. And like you said, she over delivered on that, creating a 40 plus set list for that concert, Broadway style production numbers. Once again, what's a page that businesses could take from Taylor's playbook here in providing that type of experience for their customers?
One reason why I think the demand for the Eras tour was so high is because of scarcity. Taylor Swift hadn't toured in 4 years or so before then. But on the flip side, she had an abundancy strategy where she was releasing so much music. She released 3 new studio albums during that time and a bunch of re-recordings as well. She had completely changed her release strategy. She turned on the fire hose. She used to release an album every 2 years, and during those 4 years between the pandemic and the Eras tour, she released so much new music, right? So there's all this new music that people wanted to see live. Taylor Swift's live shows have always been the culmination of every era that she's done. It's the emotional release that fans can get, that communal experience after listening to those albums in their bedrooms and in their cars. So there's 2 things here. It's on the one hand, Swift made sure to not saturate the market with her live shows. So that built up demand. And a lot of that was beyond her control. It's the pandemic, she wasn't touring. Um, but the way that she shifted during the pandemic to really adjust to the streaming era by turning on the fire hose, the content fire hose, which just create this constant engagement with her fans. Now that led to so much demand for the Eras tour. But if there's one overarching lesson, and it's something that we did talk about, is you need to go above and beyond. If expectations are so high at that point, and they were sky high for the Eras Tour, Ticketmaster said that the demand was so high that Taylor Swift would have had to play 900 shows just to meet the demand for the US leg of the tour. It's really important to be customer obsessed and to find extreme ways to delight your customers.
I'm in agreement with you, and you're right. It was a huge success, but in the streaming environment which she found herself in, and she had to evolve her marketing strategy, you have to release more content, and that's what the fan engagement, helps with that. I mean, to encourage fan engagement, and a lot of the other big artists were doing that as well. Like you mentioned, that wasn't her strategy initially, and she didn't really embrace the streaming or the digital culture because at first all of her sales were based off of albums, which she still does a decent amount on, right? But she had to really convert her strategy and try this new approach that she wasn't embracing initially, but eventually she had to adopt, correct?
For sure. I think the other important thing about the Eras Tour too is she could have monetized that in more extreme ways. So a big thing about the Eras Tour is it was huge on TikTok, and fans were live streaming the shows on TikTok. And each day during the Eras Tour, fans would watch between 200 to 300 million videos a day on TikTok, which is an extreme number. But Swift could have found a way to monetize those live streams. She could have live streamed the shows and she could have charged for it, but she didn't because she left it up to her fans to do. And this is something she's always done. She's always empowered her fans to be co creators in her own mythology, in her own career. She's always encouraged her fans to be evangelists for her and to create content around her music and her life. And it reminded me of a strategy that the Grateful Dead used in the 60s. They allowed their fans to record shows and to share those shows with other fans. And I think TikTok had a similar effect with the Eras Tour, where the amount of social influence, the amount of sharing that was going on really built up the goodwill about the Eras Tour, even though a lot of people couldn't go. And it served to expand her fan base at the same time.
I love that, and you're right. In the book, you mentioned it too. She could have had a much higher price for those tickets. She didn't want to do that. She wanted to create, some affordability, and she wanted to let her fans know that she was in it with them, and she was trying to help them in coming to her shows and making it a more affordable option instead of pricing people out, or like you said, on the other extreme, having too many shows where that scarcity effect wouldn't happen. The final question I have for you, Kevin, today, it's been a great conversation with you, is if you had to predict what will be the next big reinvention for Taylor Swift?
Predicting what's next is tough because Taylor Swift, the playbook is wide open, especially after the Eras Tour. If I was Taylor Swift and I walked out after the last Eras Tour show, I would feel daunted, but also exhilarated in a way. And if I were an investor and I was buying stock in Taylor Swift, I would buy a lot of stock right now, even though I was buying extremely, extremely high, and I'd be holding on to that stock because the fundamentals of her business is so good. Her fan obsession, her ability to adapt, to keep that core audience. I believe she will continue to do those things. And even though the Eras Tour seemed like the culmination of the last 20 years, I'm really excited for what comes next. And it would not surprise me if she makes another big move. My prediction is it's long been rumored that she was working on a rock album at some point. And when I went to the Eras Tour show, I was shocked at how hardcore the band was. Um, and I'm it wouldn't surprise me if she made a big sonic shift with this with the next album that she releases.
Well, you're right. No matter what she does next, it's going to be strategic, unexpected, and likely groundbreaking, just as every reinvention before it has been. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining me today on the podcast. So, Kevin, remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you and learn more about this great book. When is it going to be released and where they can find it?
Book is coming out April 8th. You can pre-order it now or you can wait until April 8th. It's available wherever books are sold. And you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn at Kevin Evers or Instagram. My handle is There Is Nothing Like This with underscores separating each word.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank all of you once again for listening. Remember, until next time, it's not what you know, but what you do consistently that makes a difference. I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.